Everyone, I'm Serena Fizan. Thank you so much for joining me on this Facebook Live. I'm here with prominent attorney Luke Lirot. Luke, I've known you for years. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And we are talking today about the Michael Drejka case. But before we get into that, can we just talk about your background? Of course, you are so well versed on all the amendments, but specifically the first. I know This case involves clearly the Second Amendment, but why is this case such a big deal?
Well, this case is hugely important because it really dovetails into the highly controversial Florida Stand Your Ground law and the general media attention and societal attention that the Second Amendment's gotten recently, which has picked up huge momentum. So the fact that this trial is taking place right now is really a crucible to see how those issues are reconciled, certainly by this jury and by the people that view these events.
And for those, Michael Drejka in this case, of course, has captured national attention. But for those who may not know, in fact, today is the 1 year, 1 month anniversary of when Marquis McGlockton was killed in at a Clearwater convenience store parking lot. Michael Drejka pulled a gun, shot and killed him.
Right.
In fact, Sheriff Bob Gualtieri at first initially said that he was not going to file charges, but now, Drejka is facing manslaughter charges. And today is the first day of jury selection. How important is the jury in this case, Luke?
In this case, the jury selection is all important. There is no more important factor at all in this trial because the allegiance that people have to the Second Amendment, I think, will drive their spirit as they listen to the facts and the evidence of the case. And if someone is repugnant to the Second Amendment, doesn't like the fact that there's a gun issue every other day and that we have these tragic events just taking place with such great frequency, it couldn't be more important.
And there's 6 people actually that are going to be selected on this jury. Why is it 6? Rather than 12? Is that because it's not a capital murder case?
Well, it's also the rules for the state of Florida. Any kind of a circuit court trial, you're allowed 6 jurors. I'm sure they'll pick at least 2 alternates because of the length that the trial will take. But yes, all you need is to have 6 sitting jurors, or if they want to agree to less than that, but I doubt that they will, but you have to have 6 to make a unanimous decision.
What type of jurors are both sides looking for at this point?
The defense is clearly looking for people that understand the Second Amendment and adhere to the fundamental rights that the Second Amendment gives citizens in the United States. There's a lot of debate about that, but clearly you have the right to possess firearms under the Second Amendment. And then you layer on top of that the Florida Stand Your Ground laws, so you have those two dovetailing into effect. You want people that understand that you have the right to protect yourself, ones that you'd ask about the veracity of a self-defense claim, things like that. You want to stay away from the turn the other cheek kind of guy. You want to be able to sort of find people that really embrace the Second Amendment, whereas the state is going to look for people that have no time, no patience, no understanding. They don't like guns. They don't like people that use guns. They think anything to do with guns is going to be negative. So that's really, it couldn't be more diverse. And somewhere in the middle, I think we're probably going to end up with a very interesting jury.
And you know what is so interesting? From years ago, Casey Anthony, of course, was tried in Orlando, but the jury was picked out of Pinellas County.
Right.
Sitting down with John Trevina yesterday, who is one of Michael Drejka's attorneys, he feels that Pinellas County could be favorable to them. Do you agree with that, Luke?
I do. I think that there's a pretty strong understanding of both the Stand Your Ground law because it's gotten so much media attention. And I simply don't say that in a bad way. I think it's wonderful that the media has brought that issue to light and gotten so many people to understand it more and understand it better. And I think that that's really been a service to understanding these basic rights that are really going to be important in this trial.
Could a verdict in this case affect, either verdict, could it affect the Stand Your Ground law? Florida?
Always. I mean, it's been under assault now for years. Every time that someone is either acquitted or charges are not filed, which is how Mr. Drejka's case began, the sheriff declined to file charges based on the Stand Your Ground law. Anytime that there's some tragic loss of life and the Stand Your Ground law is applied, there's always an outcry to have it diminished, receded, amended, abolished, just to get rid of it altogether. There's always some backlash, if you will, but I think it's a very good law. I think it stands for some very good social issues that I think citizens should have the right to protect themselves. And quite honestly, I think it itself will stand its ground against any assault.
And Luke, I wanted to ask you a question about this because I got several questions yesterday after I did an exclusive interview with John Trevina. When Bob Gualtieri decided not to pursue the case initially, was it the state attorney's office that stepped in? Can you clarify that? Like, how was Michael Drejka then charged in the first place?
Well, obviously, law enforcement is at the very first level of deciding whether to charge someone with a crime. There's defense, and there's certainly the discretion to make the charge in the first place. Then, once the sheriff decided not to make the charge, there was a huge outcry from the community that went to the state attorney's office. Obviously, I think that there were some political dimensions to this because the state attorney should ultimately be the one making such a decision, and it was just at that point such a rebound effect that there was just no possible way that this case was not going to go forward. I don't think that they've come up with any preordained conclusion, but to let the people decide, to let the jury decide how this case should be resolved, I think the state attorney's office felt duty bound to let that happen.
Okay, thank you on clarifying that because I got so many questions on that. Also, yesterday when I sat down with John Trevina, he said that this case was not about race. How do you respond to that?
Well, this case is not about race, but everything in our country is about race. You can't escape that factor. I think everybody understands that. I don't think it was a racially driven course of conduct. I think whatever had happened in that parking lot with whatever racial characteristics the person had that parked in the handicap spot, Mr. Drejka didn't feel that that was appropriate. The gentleman comes out of the convenience store and apparently pushes Mr. Drejka because he sees Mr. Drejka chastising apparently his wife who had chosen that parking spot, or they chose it together, and then the rest is history. That's not a racially driven issue, but whenever you have different races in different positions on either side of the V, it's always a racially driven issue, and it's just not anything that we're going to be able to get away from. We need to face that. We need to embrace it. We can't let it influence the outcome, but to ignore it, I think, would be folly.
If you're just joining this Facebook Live, I'm here with prominent attorney Luke Lirot, and we're talking about the Michael Drejka case, of course, taking place right now in Pinellas County. It's a case that has put Florida's stand your ground law and also race in the middle of the national spotlight. Once again, I'm here with Luke Lirot, and we're talking about jury selection specifically. Well, we're actually covering a lot of aspects of the case. How long do you think the jury selection could take?
Could take the rest of the week. I mean, they're going to have to bring in a whole lot of people. I think everybody involved knows the notoriety that this case has, and no one wants to make a mistake. I think the level of scrutiny, the dedication to the principles involved in jury selection, it couldn't be any higher. So I think that the time and effort to make this as well done and as properly conducted as it can be will certainly take place.
Luke, I do want to ask you this as well, because I have mentioned many times you are a prominent attorney, not just here, but nationally, and there's been a lot of articles written about you. You've been interviewed so many times. Right now, though, John Trevina, and I talked about this with him in my Facebook Live yesterday, has been the center of a lot of personal drama, including his own wife right now in jail facing felony charges, domestic abuse allegations against him that were dropped, and also the Reginald Roundtree, a very well-known anchor in this market, is no longer working at a local station, and there has been a connection with his interview with Michael Drejka. Could an attorney's personal life impact a case?
Absolutely. I think that when a prominent attorney is the subject of media attention, good, bad, or indifferent, it's going to affect the case, and you need to ask a potential juror if they've seen any of that coverage, if it would affect their ability to be fair and impartial in making their decision. But I think it's something that needs to be brought up. I certainly expect them to bring it up. I wouldn't focus on it too much. The remedy is, if you haven't heard it, great, we'll move along. But if you had, is that going to do anything to influence you in the way that you listen to the evidence and testimony in this case, and influence whether or not you can be fair and impartial in doing your duty as a juror?
Do you think a lot of people have already made up their minds on this case and on the attorneys involved?
You know, I think on the case, the video has been played so many hundreds of thousands of times. I mean, it's an image that's really just emblazoned in everybody's mind right now. I'd like to think that, as a juror is obligated to do, that they wait until they've heard all the evidence and testimony. So my response to that would be, if they've already made up their mind, they need not be on that jury.
Thank you, Luke. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to add that you feel is important or we should discuss?
Well, I think the only thing that I would comment on is, being very familiar with Pinellas County and the Circuit Court. It's probably one of the best jurisdictions to conduct a case like that, because everyone over there is steadfast in avoiding any kind of impropriety, any kind of effort to manipulate any aspect of the system. I think it's going to be a fair fight, if you will, and I can't imagine that it would be conducted in a more fair or more proper fashion than in Pinellas County.
You know, one final question. Once they do pick a jury, and you said it may even take a week, do you think the case will go pretty quickly?
You know, I hope it takes whatever time is necessary. I can't imagine anybody's going to drag their feet, and no one will be rushed. I know the presiding judge. He's the best in the business, and he will avoid any kind of cumulative testimony, but if it's someone providing responses to legitimate questions that aren't objectionable, he's going to let them say what they have to say, and he's going to be fair to both sides and let them do their jobs.
Who is the judge? And I should know this.
Judge Ballone. Judge
okay.
Ballone.
Thank you. And of course, I have covered many cases in his courtroom. So.
Yes. Excellent,
all right.
Excellent judge.
Thank you, Luke. I really appreciate it. I just want people to know, if you caught this Facebook Live in the middle, no worries. It'll be on my Facebook page. You can watch it in its entirety. I also have a website, serenafazan.com, and I will get it uploaded on there. I'm also going to post a bio on you, Luke, so people know exactly who you are as well. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
My
it's
great
always
pleasure. Thank
so
you.
great.
You're the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I paid him to say that. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.